Well, hi everybody, welcome to episode 17 Bookie, of UK Edu Stories. Tonight we're really pleased to have a stellar lineup of guests sharing with us on the show this evening. And we're looking at the key lessons that have been learned from distance learning, the good, the bad and the ugly, we've called it. Although none of our guests are ugly, they are definitely shimmying us up certain amounts. And resident shenanigator Bookie has pulled together some fantastic speakers for us on the show this evening. And I'm really looking forward to hearing from all of them, and lots of experience in the sector. Really pleased to have them join us for the show. Lots and lots to discuss. Our guests on the show this evening are Rachel Cotup, and we'll talk more about her in a bit. We've got Mark Martin, and we've got Al Kingsley sharing their experiences across multi-academy trusts, across big schools, across districts. Lots and lots of things to learn and share. And welcome to you joining us here live on the show this evening. We are looking forward to receiving your comments live on the side. Please send those through, say hello, and let us know how you're doing, how your week's been, all those sort of things. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, then please do hit that subscribe button. And we're looking forward to sharing with you over the course of the next hour. So, Bookie, welcome again. I say welcome. We're co-hosts. Why I'm welcoming you, I don't quite know. But how's your week been? How are you doing? It's a hot one, isn't it?
It's hot. I've been suffering really badly from hay fever in the last couple of days. You know, the whole thing, itchy eyes, streaming nose, coughs and things like that. I've been too scared to go outside because I don't want anyone to think I've got coronavirus or anything like that. So I've just been staying indoors. But it's a busy week. I've had a number of different videos that I've created last week that have been shared for, different educational forums, and also enjoyed the debate discussion with Net Support yesterday, as we did yesterday. So really busy and interesting as well. But thank you. How's your week been, Mark?
Yeah, really busy. I've done 2 sessions for the Global Ethics Academy this week, and did a session just this morning, actually, looking at ways to improve pupil practice using technology for teaching and learning. And yesterday I had the recording with yourself for Net Support with the big educational debate. I had 2 more recordings for that as well, which took place on Tuesday. So lots of things going on, spinning plates. I put a few blog posts out, I've sorted out some more work. I'm planning doing some work. I'm doing work with Liverpool Hope University week after next. So I've been planning some sessions for things I'm doing there with PGCE trainees who are, I think they've actually finished their courses now. I think it's an end of year sort of celebration of learning that I'm involved with that. So lots and lots of stuff on. But talking about the recording we did yesterday and the day before with Net Support, our first guest on this evening actually is Al Kingsley. So Al Kingsley is the Managing Director of Net Support. So if we bring Al into the studio now and say hello.
Please, yes.
Hello. There we go.
Hiya.
Hi, Al.
Nice to see the Mr. Anderson and the shenanigator. Lovely.
I think that name's stuck now.
I would never have ever used it, but it was self-coined, Bookie. So
it's now official. I could have put a hashtag at the front of that, but I do apologise.
Okay, welcome.
Good to see you both.
Thank you, and likewise.
So, how are things going with you, Al? I mean, before we get into digging into all that sort of stuff as well, could you share a little bit about who you are, what you do? I mean, we've got some sort of good 50 minutes left on the show, so don't use all the time with the things that you're involved with. But share for our audience who you are, what you do, that sort of thing, please.
Well, I suppose I am like many, a man with many hats. So my day job officially, I spend most of my time as MD of Net Support. We've been in business 30 years, developing all sorts of what I would define as school solutions to support education in all sorts of different ways. When I'm not doing that, I've spent the last 15 years working in school governance. I'm the chair of 2 multi-academy trusts. I'm also chair of a newly formed academy, which is a cluster of 3 pupil referral units in our town. I sit on the Regional Schools Commissioners Head Teacher Board for North London and the South East, which is very much more of an academisation and academy focus, looking at areas of there. And then in my extra free time, I chair the SEND board for Cambridgeshire. So I get involved in education in all sorts of different ways. And as you probably gather, it's kind of a passion of mine. And I like to filling my weekends doing all sorts of online chats with your good selves and other people talking about EdTech and things we've learned along the way.
Okay, wow. How do you manage to fit that all in?
Truth is, I've got no idea, but it's the truth. They're all interlinked ultimately, and we know more than anything in our space. It's all about sharing and learning, and the more you talk with people, the more you get involved, the more you pick up as well as the stuff that you share. So it's very symbiotic.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right.
Carol, the topic tonight, sort of the wins and the successes and so forth and so on. Like all of our guests, I know you've got a presentation ready to share with us. Are you ready to bring that up and just sort of run through that with us so we can then sort of dig into some of the things that you've learned from your experiences?
I'm happy to dabble with some technology and see if I can share my screen. Hopefully it's going to give me a little choice as to which screen it is. So hopefully you'll see my screen pop up now. Have you got that? Look at that.
There it is.
We better start off with a nice little smiley face there. You can see I haven't weathered the last 12 weeks of lockdown quite so well as the profile picture suggests. But really what I thought was, how do I share it from my perspective? And lots of the things are probably more about the lessons learned. And that obviously encapsulates the things that have gone well, the things less well, and the things that we really need to develop. So kind of as a starter for 10, I thought I'd just share what we've structured within our trust and from what I've picked up from the other trusts I'm working in terms of where we're focusing our 6 pillars of digital strategy around, very much shaped by the lessons we've learned in recent weeks. So it kind of starts with the first one, which is all about innovating learning. And I suppose ultimately anyone who's talking digital strategy, looking at ways that technology over the last 8 weeks or 10 weeks or 12 weeks, however long it's been going on for, have shaped it. You know, technology has played that key part. So we've kind of looked and said, well, the first thing we need to do is be reflective. It's very easy to try and look at ways to move forward quickly without actually pausing and taking the time to look backwards and identify what's worked well and what hasn't worked well. And we wanted to make sure that everything we do is shaped around that first pillar of it's all about trying to innovate the way we deliver learning. And so part of that's been identifying what's the appropriate technology. We've learned lessons that some technology has adapted better than others. And I'll come on to that when I talk about some of the things that are more teacher-centric. The use of supporting apps that will support teaching and learning, and also that kind of confidence. We've also seen that some things that have worked well have been some of the live streaming, but the conversation that I know your good selves have shared different thoughts and ideas on has been trying to find ways to deliver that blended learning model, that mix of synchronous and asynchronous. And I think as all these things are the case, some have worked well, others less so. And maybe that's because people have imagined that the technology will somehow add sparkle. And of course, we all know ultimately it's just a platform for the traditional sparkle of teacher-student engagement and the content that you're serving up as part of that. So that's kind of been one area, which is really focusing on the areas that we can build to innovate our learning by making sure we've got the right technology, the right platforms. We're learning the lessons of what's working well right now and making sure that we build on that. And probably around that, another strand we often discuss is about not trying to achieve too many things at once, actually getting that foundation in place. Next on the scoreboard that comes in from that is student digital skills. Now, that's not just the last 12 weeks, but that's more of a moving objective. And I think if you're looking at your broader digital strategy, then developing student digital skills is really, really key. You know, part of that might be the obvious thing about making sure that whatever platforms we're choosing to use, whether it's Teams, Hangouts, or other things as a baseline of recent dates, that young people have confidence in it, but also their broader confidence of using supporting apps to capture their learning, facilitate their online discovery and learning. And wrapped around that is that all-important strand that we like to maintain, which is about, I think the last 12 weeks, leaving children to do more studying themselves has also prompted more of a refresh on digital citizenship, making sure that our young people are able to understand the risks about spending more time online, but also how they disseminate the quality of information, being a little bit more critical themselves about what's real and isn't and how they might evidence that. The next one, which I'm sure will resonate with everybody who's on the conversation today, is about teacher skills and creativity. And probably number one has been the fact, and I'm a little bit bored of saying it really, because I think most people who are EdTech folks have been saying it for years, A little bit more focus needed to have been spent on CPD. A little bit more time and funding need to have been aligned to CPD to make sure not just our flag bearers, but all of our team and staff have confidence using the tools that we want to build our learning platforms on. So one of the good starting points of that is actually doing a fresh digital skills survey, because I bet you the views and the answers people give will be quite different now from 12 weeks ago. And that's another part of that reflective process. Making sure we actually prioritise where the CPD needs to be, and again, on what, not trying to teach everybody 10 new tools at once, but those core things. And then looking about how we look at the trust-wide side. And it'll come on to one of our pillars, which is more about focus about well-being. But actually, we've seen there's been some real advantages of late with the use of certain collaborative platforms to actually foster teacher-to-teacher collaboration and sharing that often was lacking when they were in the physical space and time and engagement didn't allow. So trying to build on that, and also the accessibility of our technology. So that's kind of been another strand. The next one, no surprise for all those who are into the technology side of things, is really been focusing on what we're doing in terms of our technology and infrastructure, because that's the foundations that we rely on. And some of that's been looking at our IT platforms. One thing we did, which it's something I regret, but it's a decision that was taken based largely on financial reasons a couple of years ago, was to reduce down the number of staff one-to-one devices in favour of front-of-class technology. It was cheaper, and it meant that if staff weren't available and there was cover, there was a device front of class. And recent events have highlighted that if teachers don't have their own piece of school technology wherever they are, you suddenly create a break in the process if you're then asking them to deliver effective online learning, you know. And so we want to make sure that teachers have the tools and the confidence in their own device to make sure they can deliver from anywhere effectively. So that's been another aspect that we've kind of wanted to look at. And then there's the broader infrastructure about what tools, have we got the right online capacity, resources. And that's also, of course, linked to how we're going to actually target the work we've been doing on sort of bringing down that digital divide. So lots of schools like ours have looked and said, well, what about, you know, sharing 4G dongles for data? We've got lots of student cohort where, as budgets and household incomes have diminished, data plans and other things have reduced. But also that foolish assumption that everyone's going to have access to technology. Now, we knew that would be a challenge come what may. But even if families do have technology, 2 or 3 kids in the household, often it's challenging for them to all be learning simultaneously. So looking at our infrastructure and tech available for loan and sharing to make sure those families that need our support with technology can get it. And then the next strand after that was communication. Probably the biggest single thing that we've learned, which is communication is key. And let's be honest, that's not just the last 12 weeks, but when you're not in the physical space, you have to make more effort to make sure that communication and feedback is even more effective. And that's also involved us developing. We use Teams, we're an Office 365 infrastructure in our main trust. So we've very much built and developed around those Teams channels, make sure that we're sharing content, utilizing it more effectively. We're developing the use of OneNote more effectively, and also looking at that communication for one of the key ones, which doesn't appear top of the list when you're doing your assessments, but is about how we develop that home to school communication. And I think for us, we've had lots of success in building that communication strategy with our parents, which is really, really important. It builds not only that kind of confidence level of student engagement, but also parental confidence levels. And it's allowed us to, not just through the traditional means, but utilizing lots of learning on social media, activities, events, virtual sports days, things that have worked really, really well for us to break down that missing boundary of not having the physical space. And then last, and absolutely not least in terms of our pillars, has been well-being, because this has been a time where probably the most challenging area has been the confidence of some of our learners. Some of our learners who have really do rely on routine and schedule have really missed out on having that contact, both with their peers, but also with teachers. So making sure that well-being is at the heart, using the tools to foster better collaboration between teachers and children, often one-to-one that need a much more frequent and regular touch. So learning about how we do that, looking at tools for teacher well-being, minimizing and reducing assessment, how things can automate and make things easier. it always seems to be there's conversations about teacher wellbeing, and at the end of the conversation, it involves a couple of emails out to teachers and more work rather than actually wellbeing focus flipping around the other way. So developing that, and the bigger wellbeing has been things like looking after our young people. We have an all through school as part of our trust, as well as separate primary and secondaries. Transitions, that year 6 to year 7 nervousness of what's it going to be like going to that big school. So doing virtual walkthroughs, having the teachers they're going to encounter, being able to meet the young people online to reduce that fear and concern, having closer engagement with our exam year groups and so on. All those aspects are things that we've really worked on to try and focus on it. And making sure, again, when it comes to wellbeing, looking at particularly our SEND and other students that need that greater interaction, making sure that that's been one of the primary drivers for those kind of pillars. And so really, I suppose my presentation, to give you a very brief and potted summary, was really just to share that lots about what we've learned is how do you capture the important things and make sure at the end of this, if there is an end and we return to the new norm, how do we actually take those points on board and build on them and interweave them into our future teaching and learning? For the first time now, I've got teachers saying, well, this would be great for a snow day. Why don't we do that? Instead of closing the school, we could be delivering learning to key groups at home. In the Easter holidays, why do we bring them in for revision classes when we could be delivering it remotely? And so I hope there's lots of those things that will be lessons that we will bring to the table moving forward.
Yeah, no,
so there you go.
Thank you
very much, Al. Thank you.
Shall I stop sharing my screen to you?
Go for it, yeah.
Please, yeah.
There you go, look, and we're all back. So yeah,
it's the first question, Brookie.
Yeah, sorry, Mark. Yeah, no, great summary. I love some of the things, particularly I think the well-being aspect, and also about the communication strategy that you said that should be in place to aid communication between the school, students, and parents. I think is really key. I suppose one question I'd ask is, if we were to experience, say, for example, a second lockdown, or schools were being asked to close again on matters we'd experienced, what advice would you give to schools and colleges to make sure that they prepared fully for this?
Well, I think I probably touched on part of it at the beginning, which is to be reflective, look at what things have worked well, make sure they're embedded, make sure all staff have confidence so that you have those 2 or 3 key approaches that across your teaching cohort you have confidence you can deliver. Have those in the bag and embed that, and don't assume that at the end of this everyone's an expert, because we all discover new features and have different levels of confidence. So that's kind of the starting point, I think, and have measures of how we can do that. The second thing is to make sure that we do it again, we've got a clear process that our young people know what to expect. And that comes down to that kind of confidence in how we deliver expectations of what online learning is going to be about. And it's an area that, there's plagiarism rules here. I've heard you good folks talk about these areas as well. So it's not coming from my, necessarily from my wisdom, but, there's an effectiveness of online learning. And I think those simple things that often get talked about, which is, it's just not about connecting like we are in here now and having dialogue. It's about setting expectations when we start the dialogue of what we're hoping to achieve from this, how we're going to do it, making sure that there's consistent feedback so that schools can start to actually get some confidence that there's some progress being done. And again, at different age groups, those kind of shapings differ, obviously.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for a comprehensive answer. And I think some of the key aspects you said about looking at what can actually be in place to ensure that there's progressive learning that can be demonstrated clearly as well. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thank you. It's really refreshing as well for you to reflect on the decisions that were made around sort of front of house desktop PCs. There's always sort of thing there. And I understand why many schools do that, for consistency of experience, for ease of updating the machines and so forth and so on. And we talked about the show this evening being about good, the bad and the ugly. I wouldn't necessarily put that sort of comment into the ugly. But have you got any kind of things that you would describe that have happened that you've seen that haven't been as good as they could have been? So sort of linked to the ugly things. Is there any ugly thing that you've seen sort of come about and happen?
Well, let me share kind of from my travels, like kind of anecdotal ugly. I mean, the number one ugly for me with all the things, and we look at those pillars, is when you challenge the question about school to student communication and you haven't seen young people have regular contact with their teachers. That to me is one of the most important ones. Now that's not specifically what we're talking about, but it's an important strand for me. The one that I think is ugly may be harsh, because I think a lot of schools have had to deliver on priority and necessity in a really challenging time, is really where learning has been a set of resources that's been sent out and they haven't really been tracking or providing feedback. Now, I get absolutely no school was able to click a switch and suddenly deliver the day as it was before. And many schools rightly have been delivering resources for young people to engage in. But I think the key point is you then buy into an expectation of regular feedback to keep the motivation, to keep the focus for young people. And so I think really ugly is too hard a word. I think it's a case of making sure that if you buy into that agreement with young people that we're trusting you to go away and do this work and research, that they get that positive confirmation and that steer back the other way. And I think rather than ugly, I think it's more lessons learned is the fairer option, because everybody's had so many priorities that it's not really a criticism. It's more, let's make sure that we recognise that maybe this is as much about capacity, frankly. And some of that could have been fixed if schools knew a couple of weeks sooner than they were told on the news about what was going to happen. But that's a whole nother conversation we could have.
Sorry to, fair point. Yeah.
I think I might have set Wookie off now.
Very good point there.
That's really great. Oh, thank you. We've had some comments come through. Nick Corsten from Steamco has just told us that we're all looking really good. So that's nice. Thank you very much for that comment, Nick.
Thanks, Nick.
And looking forward to your Glastonbury alternative event this weekend. So looking out for that. Thank you for joining us tonight, Nick. A comment from Adnan Izzad as well, talking about the implications of synchronous versus asynchronous learning and considerations that need to be sort of thought about all around that, and regarding which of those, they've said, which of the two strategies will be used. But I don't know what your thoughts are, Brookie and Al, but my thoughts certainly around asynchronous versus synchronous. I don't think it necessarily is a one or the other type camp. It's about thinking about your context and then actually looking at which parts of, because there are benefits to both scenarios. So I think it's a blended, not one or the other. What's that?
I think whenever we hear the term blended in most things, it's very rare that there's one thing that in 100% is the perfect solution to anything.
True.
Not least because the topic and the learners will adapt the requirements to a certain point. And I think that blended learning approach is the key. There's a practical sense here, which is actually in many cases based on capacity, not least with recent events. The expectation of 100% synchronous day was almost impossible unless magically every learner had perfect connectivity and all your staff were accessible and available. So it is ultimately about providing that blend. But one thing I heard from case studies from the UAE and schools I've spoken to here, which I think is really, really important, is I'm not sure that should be a school-wide policy. I think there is an obligation, particularly over the last 12 weeks, to put your faith and trust in individual teachers to deliver what works best for them and their students throughout the day. I think that mandate of you must do this is really quite short-sighted.
And possibly so, where if you have some school leaders who aren't quite sure about what you should be doing, I suppose it's like pushing the barriers in terms of how far can you actually go with the technology they actually got in place. But that's about trust. I think it's about trust in terms of your staff, but also trust in the belief that the tech, whatever you've got, will do what you want it to do. But in order to have that trust, you've got to be clear about what do you want it to do anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This is a new scenario for everybody. And you're right, most successful failure of new technology in any shape comes down to that teacher confidence curve. From that, and Mark's shown some nice little Sylvia Duckworth diagrams before that, you start off in survival mode and you're going to work your way through as your confidence levels build to the point where you become innovative with the way you use technology. And I think this is something new. And if schools haven't been using Teams or Hangouts or Zoom or whatever before as one delivery mechanism, to expect that all teachers to have absolute confidence in utilising that throughout, I think is wrong. I think what we can turn around and say is, if you want to move more and more towards where it's appropriate synchronous delivery of education, then invest the CPD and time now to make sure that the teachers have the confidence to utilise that as a platform. But that's just one part. You've still then got to deliver the content behind that, and it doesn't happen overnight.
Very true.
I'm really keen to get Rachel Kotup's sort of input on this. I've seen her nodding sort of ferociously in the virtual lobby to the things that are being discussed. And I think a colleague of us, Graham, has just joined us in the chat as well. So I've been Rachel in here, and welcome to the show, Rachel. I believe Graham is a colleague of yours at Leo Academies. So welcome and thank you, Graham, for joining us on the show this evening as well.
Hi,
Did you have any thoughts on that question before about sort of synchronous versus asynchronous? And I think we were saying how the nods would suggest that what we were saying sort of resonated with you. What are your experiences across the academies?
Yeah, in terms of Leo Academy Trust, which is where I work, and obviously I'll go into that when I start, but I think it is very much a conversation that schools need to have in terms of where they're at and, you know, what is going to work best for the pupils and for the teachers, and in terms of device capacity as well, because all of those things need to be factored in, whether a synchronous approach will work or that's an asynchronous learning approach. And I think that's, you know, that is very something to consider in regards to all of this. It's not every school needs to be doing synchronous lessons, and that is the only way. And I think it's really important that there is that understanding that sometimes synchronous will work fantastically, but it doesn't mean it's the only way of continuing to deliver education, even though the schools are closed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Really good point.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Could you, so I gave you a little bit of an introduction there, but could you just share with us, please, Rachel, who you are, what you do, where you come from, all that sort of stuff, please, just so people who are watching can find out about you a bit more, please?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Rachel. I'm originally from Australia. I was classroom teacher there for 2 years and then moved over to the UK, where I took on the role of the computing teacher, and then and now leading on technology at Leo Academy Trust. And also a Google certified trainer and innovator.
Yeah, you're a big fan of Google tools. Everywhere I go, there's a picture of you stood next to some sort of Google sort of banner somewhere in a Google sort of building somewhere. It's a fantastic ecosystem to share, and I'm guessing that you'll be sharing some of that during the presentation you've got for us this evening. Are you ready to present that to us and share now? Is that okay?
The screen's ready to go. Just pull me in.
Brilliant stuff. I'll just bring you up. There we go. Fantastic.
You know, I know you alluded to sort of my passion and love for Google, but it is sort of worth noting that, you know, I've worked in schools that were Apple based, and I think when it comes to sort of technology, just as a side note, that, you know, it is very much about utilizing what you have and what works within your school. It doesn't matter if that's Google or Apple or Microsoft, or, you know, if you're using other platforms. It's what works for, you know, for your teachers, for your students, and ultimately just continues to have that learning take place. So just a little bit, you know, about me. There's sort of my Twitter handle as well, to give me a follow, and my innovator project, which I'll just sort of call out in terms of staff CPD, and that's been something that very much came about during this whole distance learning thing, was how do we actually continue to drive teachers to get their CPD happening and to sort of be incentivized to do that. And that's what that is all about. But I won't go too into deep, because this is about distance learning. And I think it's important to sort of talk about this process and share some sort of key takeaways that we've learned as a trust. You know, we are a trust of 6 schools. We've got 3,500 odd pupils. And, you know, just some sort of key messages to think about, as there is a lot of uncertainty right now in terms of what September is going to look like. And I think sort of the key thing to remember is that in terms of all of this, it's very much that, you know, our pupils are capable, and they've shown that during this distance learning. You know, they are so adaptive to change. And I think sometimes we forget that message. And obviously they are creative. And I think being able to give pupils the opportunity to be creative and to share their understanding in different ways has really come about and driven forward through distance learning. And also, you know, in all of this, the personal connections and connections with other educators around the world is so important for, you know, for teachers to continue to learn, but also to just share ideas, share stories, to make connections, because, you know, learning doesn't stop. And I think, you know, just being able to network and meet new educators is so important for us. Otherwise, we can become fixed in the mindset that you know, our way is the only way. So I think that's really important to consider. And also that, you know, distance learning is not something we've experienced before. I know, you know, in Asia where they've had these moments before where they've got systems in place when there's school closures. This is very new for, you know, the majority of the world. And I think it is important to consider that it's not about replicating the school. It is rethinking the way that learning happens online. So in terms of distance learning, I think when we think about the good, the bad, and the ugly, we definitely, and Al mentioned that before, is that there are lots of aspects of distance learning that we've seen sort of negatively, where we did see schools that just didn't respond. They didn't follow through with anything. Maybe didn't even send paper packs home, and you know, I think that is such a disjustice to our children. And, you know, yes, okay, maybe not responding in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks of this happening, but, you know, we've been in lockdown now for quite some time. And I think it is important that schools do respond to this. It isn't just about, okay, well, you know, paper packs are fine, we'll just continue to send home new paper packs that they can continue to do. It is really important that we actually reconsider what we are offering and how we are supporting our children at home as well. And I think the key thing for us when we started for distance learning was that we wanted to be able to find out what devices our pupils had access to at home. And that was the key thing, is knowing what device they have. We also went and very quickly, Graham procured some devices just before we went into lockdown. So we were able to do that, and also to offer dongles for internet for those children that didn't have access to that. And that was a huge thing in terms of our digital strategy and being able to support that. But equally, it's very much about thinking, and this was where we decided that we were going to use Google Sites to store all of our lesson resources and our recorded videos. And this was also on that side of that asynchronous approach, which was going to be more flexible for our families that might not have been able to have their children sit there and watch, you know, their lesson from 8 o'clock until 3 o'clock live. So this was very much sort of that approach. And then using video conferencing to actually allow our pupils to interact, see their other pupils, and also to see their teacher. And initially, this was very much is this going to be a learning opportunity? But actually what it did was it just naturally evolved into a very much wellbeing focused session that was based around sort of just having those connections, having those moments to share those concerns, share, you know, how they're feeling. You know, there was lots of pets being shown, their favorite toys, work that they've been doing. And I think all of these moments are so important. And when it comes to well-being, I think we've all seen just the effects of being in lockdown and how that impacts on our own well-being as educators, but also if that's impacting on us as educators, we need to keep that in mind for our pupils as well. And I think that's so important. And that we do, you know, whether that's through Twitter or other social media platforms, that we just continue to motivate and uplift other teachers. You know, I think it's a very difficult time for everyone. And the more that we can actually continue to sort of support and encourage each other to try something new is really important there. So I'm just thinking, so in terms of sort of the potential challenges that we very much had to sort of overcome initially, was we wanted to continue to offer staff CPD. And this was something that was already part of our digital strategy. And, you know, quite quickly it was, let's throw a, you know, huge offering of webinars available for our teachers, but also for anyone in the community that follow up on Twitter. We're able to see the actual series of webinars that we were offering. And we do this because we want to empower other schools that maybe don't have those opportunities to offer CPD to staff, that they can actually come and learn something new as well. But we also had to juggle that aspect of teacher workload, where teachers are working, you know, on the weekends, working really late. And I think sort of having that support, having that trust in your staff is really important as well. And I think some of the other potential challenges that we need to consider is if schools haven't put something into place, or if they have put something short term right now, is what that's going to look like if this happens again. And ultimately, that's what we need to be doing right now, and thinking about not only accountability in terms of our staff that might not be delivering lessons, recorded lessons or live lessons, but also just thinking about, how are we actually checking in what they're doing, and, that progress that they're making in terms of their own professional development. And also the accountability that we put onto our pupils. We really do want to see that they are taking the learning that we're providing and engaging with that, so that they are continuing to maintain the routines that they're so used to in school. But also, I think as teachers, distance learning sort of threw a lot of teachers off and thinking, oh, well, the routines and expectations that I'd usually have in the classroom suddenly aren't a key part of distance learning. And actually, they are so important. Having those expectations of our pupils in an online platform is still just as important as if you're in the classroom. So in terms of what we should be considering right now, I think it's very important for leaders, for teachers, not to be sort of second guessing that this might not happen again, or we might not be in this situation again. But also, to be considering devices, consider access, consider what devices you have in your school community, whether there are platforms available where they can continue to access learning if this does happen for September, or if things do change, but also thinking about how you're supporting staff and pupil wellbeing as well. Please just tell me if I'm talking for too long and cut me back off.
You're absolutely fine. You're fine.
So a couple of key takeaways to finish up with then. And this is, I've said these before, so apologies to those that have heard me before, but it's very important to start small. If you haven't done anything, try something new. Try one thing. It might not work the first time, because technology doesn't always work the first time, and I know everyone on this call will completely agree with that. But equally, give it that go. Try something and see if it works. And if it doesn't, refine, improve, make it better. And I think that's so important. Be flexible. We've had to be flexible during this whole time. Our working hours, when we're having staff meetings, when we're meeting with our pupils, the way that we're delivering our lessons. It's not just to take everything we've done in the classroom and spin it online, because it won't work. If we just took our exercise book and thought, okay, I'm going to sit there and use a stylus and red pen over every single spelling mistake on a pupil's work and write a written comment, it's not effective teaching. And it is very much rethinking the way that we use that tech, if that is what you're doing at the moment. And then, as I said, expect mistakes. Things won't always work perfectly. And I think whether that's our teachers, whether that is our learners, we do need to expect them that they will make mistakes. This is an opportunity for them to learn. They haven't had channels for communication. So I think if you sort of cut off all levels of them being able to talk to each other and to ask questions, then these mistakes are going to happen as well. And most importantly, and sort of last of all to finish with, is to continue to connect and learn. I'm so grateful to be on the channel tonight, but just in its own, I've already met 3 amazing educators. So I think as teachers, it is really important that we do continue to connect with other educators, and whether that's in person, whether that's at school, whether that's on online conferences, or just through social media, that we do continue to connect and learn from each other, and seek out those opportunities to learn something new, because ultimately it all falls down on us. It's not our senior leaders offering CPD. It's not the government saying, okay, every school needs to go and do X, Y, and Z. It comes from ourselves. And the minute that we say that learning, that's it, yep, I know everything there is to know, we'll never progress. We'll never change the way that we teach and deliver learning to our pupils as well.
No, absolutely agree with that, Rachel. Thank you so much. And you're echoing the words of the great Dylan Willen there about education and it being a really tough job and all of that. I've got some lovely comments as well coming in from some of our guests, some of our visitors, viewers this evening as well. For example, James Keefe, a previous guest, somebody who you might know through social media. If you don't, he's a very worthy follower. He echoes exactly what you just said there, which is that's the wrong thing to bring up. It was just when hearing about connecting with other educators, so key in your development. I wouldn't be able to do what I do now if it wasn't for the things that I've done, stepping outside my comfort zone and connecting with other people and all the things that you're talking about there. I loved the comments at the beginning of your presentation where you said, I do love Google, but, you know, and you talked about other things. And as I will... probably you'll only hears this, but I always talk about this Bananarama thing where it ain't what you do so much, it's the way that you do it. And so that resonates exactly with what you're talking about there, which is, you know, it's not about being a Google or an Apple or a Microsoft ecosystem. It's about using what you've got and doing that really, really, really well. And those tips at the end, Rachel, about keeping things small, being flexible, so forth and so on, are absolutely brilliant. Is the presentation anywhere available for people to view through your social media anywhere? Is that part of something you've available through Leo Academies or?
Yeah,
sure
I'll happily share it out on Twitter after this.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you a question, Rachel, but before I come into my question, Al, did you have a question you wanted to ask Rachel?
Loads. We'll start with the easy one. Do you want a job? No, I'm joking. I love the point about using that early part about the synchronous lessons about well-being as a starting point. But the thing that I also thought was interesting, that was not one that I've seen as much of, but always pick up these ideas, was about making the resources that you're sharing available to other schools. And we've seen so much support between educators on other platforms. I was just interested in about how that's developed. Has it been well received, or is it in its infancy in terms of sharing some of the resources you're doing with other schools?
No, definitely. So we actually had our distance learning website completely open to everyone, and anyone is able to access all of those resources that are available on our Google site. So there are recorded video lessons, there's lesson resources, there's a whole range of activities, both screen time activities and non-screen time activities as well. And I think one of the key things for us was being able to offer education, was we knew that there were a lot of schools that weren't doing that. And, you know, that's been well received around the globe, which has actually been really exciting for us. As well as, you know, in terms of our CPD, we've had lots of schools around the area, but also sort of further out that have actually accessed that CPD as well.
And that's really fantastic to hear. You got such great sort of recognition for those things, sharing. I'm keen to bring Mark Martin in, our next guest. I'm just mindful of time. Time always runs away with us on the show. But I'm really, really eager to hear what Mark has to share. So welcome, Mark. Hi, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing? I'm fine, thank you.
Good to see you, yeah. Keeping well.
Nice.
Great to see you, Mark. Did you have any comments about the thing? You've been patiently waiting in the lobby to come on and join us. Did you have any comments about what Al and Rachel have been sharing so far this evening?
Yeah, I think there's an emerging theme around, being very agile in this time. And I think that, the more we are, some of the fixed traditions that we had previous in education definitely needed to change and become more agile. And hopefully, as I share my presentation, I can provide some insight in terms of how, different stakeholders and what they actually need to do to become more agile in their work.
Oh, brilliant. Well, do you want to bring it up now and we can sort of dive straight into that then, if it's going to be relevant to...
Cool.
Of course, it's going to be relevant, but...
Can you see my screen? Okay.
Not quite yet.
Yep, let's just do that now. Okay. Super.
Okay, there we go. And you're in.
Okay, so I want to quickly talk about the landscape before and after lockdown. And, I've been thinking about what is education, what was education before COVID, what is education during COVID, and what does education look like after COVID. And it's really important that when we do look at the before, during, and after, Is there new things that we need to learn, or do we take in some of the existing kind of things that we've traditionally done? And I was trying to look at some of the issues that affected our young people before lockdown, in terms of youth violence, aspirations, poverty, alternative pathways now into being introduced into schooling, the career pathways, in terms of, did they really understand what's available for them on their doorstep? And then, you know, of lately, discrimination in terms of, do they have equal access and opportunities to some of these you know, courses or jobs that we're training them up for? And then when we think across the whole kind of landscape, we're thinking about, you know, where are the access points for our young people to engage with? Where are the opportunities? Do they understand? Are they aware? Do their families know that? Like, you know, as me being a computer science teacher, do they understand that, you know, is there digital jobs on their doorstep? Do they understand that there's big companies moving into local spaces that they can actually connect with and have a career there? And then also connections in terms of, are they connected to professionals? Are they connected to industry leaders that can actually help them understand the landscape that they operate in? And before COVID, a lot of working in South London as a computer science teacher in a UTC, we're really heavily focused on digital skills engineering. And one of the things that I found is that a lot of their local spaces were becoming tech hubs and digital spaces. And most of my students will walk past this on a daily basis and not understand what's happening inside. And one of the things that I found, and a key for me before COVID, is that how much do we really connect young people to the local spaces that they operate in? Are we just like satisfied that they come to school and we teach them and that's it? We don't really connect them to the local economy or ecosystem in their local spaces. So one of the questions I asked is that, what does the online space look like? So if we knew that their local space is becoming really digitalized, what happens online is you know, some of these big tools like TikTok, you know, YouTube, these are the things that they only seen online? Are they seeing amongst all the crowded noise a lot of the online content that teachers have put recently and that we put in our VLEs? So that was the kind of question I've been thinking about. What are they battling with? And then, you know, before COVID, a lot of their local environment was becoming digitalized, from the local supermarket to all the way into fast food, where they had to touch, and, you know, they can touch and order a burger from a touch screen. And then with transport, obviously being was free at the time, where they could tap in an Oyster, and then local spaces now becoming digitalized too. And then one of the funniest things is that if you look at the stats between online activity with young people in their bedroom playing these computer games, it'll be really interesting to see how much worlds they've built during COVID, how much battle thoughts they've built, you know, during COVID, and how much they've been innovative. But what happens is this: I just want to quickly jump to this headline where, you know, there's, you know, 4 in 10 have little contact with teachers of online learning. It'll be interesting to see how much, you know, innovation they've done on these computer games or on these kind of social media platforms compared to online work, and what they've actually produced. Have they really designed like the next football stadium or whatever they've been producing online? And then how can we actually bring that back into education to have some real, you know, fruitful conversations with our young people, but also with educators too? One of the things that I've been thinking about is you can't digitalize a broken education system. You just end up with a broken digitalized ed tech. And if the education system before wasn't working for our young people, like for some of our young people, they didn't find the existing education system motivating or engaging. So what does it mean that if we put it online, would it make a difference? And I just think that what you'll find in most cases, it won't, because, you know, we needed to do something different or have a new norm in the way we look at things. So I've done a little COVID Maslow in terms of what does our young people currently need, especially in London. So we know that food, Marcus Rashford has helped a percentage of our young people that have free school meals. Transport's been frozen by TfL. Unemployment. So I don't know if you've seen the report, 16 to 24-year-olds have been on furlough, and now some of them have lost their jobs. I teach A-levels. That's affected some of our students. Some of the apprenticeships that were offered are not being offered no more. And then the university placements has now become online. So that means that for the next 1 or 2 years, they're going to be having to attend university online. And all of these things we need to think about, because you can't just think about what happens in school with young people or what's happening at home. We've got to have a holistic approach. And I think that as an educator, if we have a holistic approach to how we view lockdown, then we're better able to engage them and really help them and nurture them in this time of real crisis. But what you find most time is the EdTech reality. Now, we try to design stuff for our young people, but that might not be the desired path they want to take. And in this diagram here shows a kind of a great illustration sometimes in terms of all of this online learning that we've put online. It's not really worked for a lot of our learners, and a lot of our learners have probably taken shortcuts to be able to submit something to keep the teacher happy, or just log on, then log back off, and off they go for the rest of the day. So what is it that needed to be taken into consideration to really understand where our young people are at with their home learning? So one of the things that I would say is that what is the new norm? Because the old norm wasn't working. Or was it? Yeah, that's a little grammatical error there. That the EdTech spell check didn't work there, so I'll let that off. But the old norm wasn't working for some. So what is this new norm that we're looking at? I've seen teachers' roles change. So I support a lot of teachers around the world. Now they're becoming a motivator online. They're becoming facilitators in the sense that they're coaching young people through the learning compared to just sitting at a camera and talking face to camera. And that facilitator role could be you offer a piece of work to the young person, and then when they do come online with the teacher, you're working through the misconceptions and some of the errors that they had got wrong while being coached. So we've got lots of teachers online now. Before any teaching is taking place, there's a space for young people to talk about the content. I wonder how many teachers across the country are letting young people, before you just ramble on and online about what they're going to learn for the day, actually, what is it? Have we created a space to hear where they're at in terms of mental health and confidence with the work? And that goes on to the next point around confidence building. Nearly finished. So some of the game changers to remote learning, I think that one of the biggest mistakes we didn't do, or we did do, is around parental involvement. Probably before lockdown, there should have been a parents' evening in schools, working with parents to understand, their skill sets, their technical abilities, and just having some kind of engagement. I think what's happened during lockdown is that we've tried to have that engagement with some parents, and if you've got 10 teachers phoning one parent, it can be very overwhelming. So I think there needs to be a bit more structure around that. But going forward, that will be a real key to really improve remote learning. Co-creation, I think there was a massive need for young people to co-create alongside teachers what the on-learning resources may have looked like. Content creation, we always know that's fun when you've got different activities involved. Purpose-driven, gives everyone a fight, and then social impact. And that's just around could young people could be doing something around COVID-19, around pollution, around how do they keep the environments more friendly. And I think that if we gave our students more of a purpose, they would have been able to connect the English, the science, the maths, all of the subjects to try and solve a real life issue. So EdTech is a tool, an enabler. It needs the human touch. And that's me, Mark Martin. Thank you very much. If you want to get in contact with me, that's my email address. Back over to you, Mark.
Brilliant stuff. Thank you very much for that presentation there. What I always admire about you, Mark, and so I've known you for quite a few years now, what I always admire about you is how you sort of want to raise and lift people up, and you think about the big picture, the social impact of the enterprise and the young people and the disadvantage they come from. and trying to really raise aspirations. And that really shone through again in your presentation tonight. Lots of great points. I've taken a few screenshots. I didn't take a screenshot of that one with the spelling mistake on it. It was the spelling mistake, you know what I mean. I wanted to ask you though, Mark, and sort of drilling into some of the questions that we've got here. How might schools go about doing these things? Because a parental involvement one is quite sort of personal for me as a parent as well. And how have you got any advice for how schools might better do that, given the current situation? Because everyone had such a short amount of time before we went from being in school to not being in school, and engaging with parents and it is absolutely key. The triangulation between parent, child, and school is so important in terms of progress and all the rest of it. Have you got any tips or advice for schools about how they can actually go about doing that, given where we're at right now?
So historically, we've done parents' evening in a physical setting where we sit at tables and we book in parents during a different time. And I think that there was a great window when COVID was happening. We could have just done online parents' evening 3 times a day. So whether parents are doing something in the morning, we could have had something in the afternoon and something in the evening. And then what that would have done is that would have given a clear information to the parents so they understand what to do. And then finally it's around timetabling, because one of the things is that as subject teachers, if a school didn't have that a protocol of phoning home and engaging with the parents, sometimes that could be pretty difficult. So I just think that there could have happened to have it online, the parents' involvement online, much more than the beginning stages.
It's a great point and comment there. Thank you very much. James reinforcing that, some interesting points on how we need to evolve our delivery to keep it relevant to our young people. Thank you, Mark. As I was watching, I even made a similar comment myself, actually, whilst you were presenting and sharing in there as well. I just want to come back to Al and Rachel a second. And we'll come to you, Rachel, first, actually. Did you have any questions or comment about what Mark has been sharing, please?
Yeah, Mark, I love the last one that you finished with. I wish I'd taken a screenshot, but you moved quick to move to the last one quickly. But I think what you summed up and said is just, so important in education right now. And I think it is something that, schools do need to think about what they're doing and rethinking, it is for our learners ultimately, and, giving those opportunities for them to be involved in how this actually looks, because they are the ones that are accessing what we're delivering as educators. So, we do need to keep them in mind in all of this.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rachel. Al, did you have anything to add or any questions for Mark?
I was going to comment. I mean, apart from the fact that the thing that really resonates with Mark's presentation, it's all about the human part, not the technology. It's all about that interaction, that relationship between the people. So I think that's kind of a real driver through. The other thing that I think does resonate, and we discussed it at different age groups, but Mark made a point about making some of the learning have that kind of social context about current issues, that involvement. And we had the conversation even right down to our early years and Key Stage 1 setting, and talking about learning has different shapes, and it doesn't have to be a worksheet and a textbook right now. Actually giving people a reason to interact more with their parents, to discover, to question, to challenge, just developing other skills is just as important during this lockdown period. So I'm really interested, and I think that's a really important thing about getting things that people actually have an interest and a passion in, and they're actually learning about things that are outside of perhaps the topics that would have been naturally discussed had COVID not happened, perhaps.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, sorry, I'm just picking up on the points and absorbing as always. I love, Mark, what you said about the holistic aspect and not just thinking about school, but beyond, like university now is going to be in a different context. Also with regard to employment. And one of the things I've been thinking of more recently is actually thinking about how we could use this, if there's new environment of distance learning, of maybe doing things, say, like work experience or, like interview skills, things that we normally squeeze out in a different context, may have the space to do that. So I just think it's a great opportunity to just do things in a completely different way. And I think also, as you said, has been mentioned before, look at developing skills. We've got a lot of things that actually can support the, the knowledge base that students actually have. But I think now would be a great time to tap into the skills and learn things in a different way. Okay. All right then. Well, if no one's got any more comments, we are wrapping. We're actually approaching an hour. I never know where the minutes fly past, but it's really interesting. And I say this every week, and I mean it genuinely. We could actually sit here easy for another half an hour and just learn from each other and the different experiences. But thank you, Al, Rachel, and Mark for joining us this evening, for sharing your insights as well. Greatly appreciated. And thanks to our audience as well, who've actually joined, and also to our subscribers. So new subscribers, welcome. If you've not subscribe, please do. We're going to be obviously continuing with UK Edu Stories next week. And next week, we're going to be looking at something slightly different. We're actually going to be considering how we could utilise outdoor learning effectively and as part of the distance learning that is still taking place. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Have a great evening, great week, and we hope to see you next week as well. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.